Welcome to the Suzane Northrop Show, where the spirit world comes alive.
Hi, everyone. This is Suzane, as they would say, live from Los Angeles. I'm not so sure how live I am from Los Angeles because I love this place, but my God, you're in the car for hours. Being a New Yorker, I'm not kind of totally used to that. And my dear colleague and friend, Jodi Jones, is probably not quite used to that either.
Hey, everybody.
But here we are, and this is, I think, my second or my third live StreamYard show, and as typical usual, when I start to do this, I feel like I'm in like maybe third grade, learning a whole new language. My God, which is really kind of interesting.
Right.
And maybe you feel the same way, Jodi. I certainly feel the same way. And the thing is, there's the basic system is you do the basic thing, and then you do you get your name and your number, and for some reason mine doesn't keep doing that, and then I get myself stuck in the corner. But you all don't need to know that, except for that this is typical Suzane. And I don't totally blame it on the other world, but the other world is certainly part of it because it's a process of that. There's a process of that. And Jodi and I we had this conversation, I think not too long ago, honey, when I was on your podcast about and I have to say that one of the things, besides the obvious, it was a phenomenal podcast, is that one of the things that you said that was so true, and I guess I just don't think about it a lot, was that we really are different. and I went to sleep that night really thinking about that, and it's just like, I think when you've done something like for 40 years, I don't think you think about it that way and sort of on the same way. But in any case, it was quite wonderful for me to think about that, and I came to the conclusion that you were absolutely right. And so there we are. But you can certainly put in questions in here, and I want Jodi. I mean, I could certainly introduce her because she's a fine human being, and really knows her stuff. And she did a shift more from mediumship into kind of what she's doing now. And I can tell that because we've definitely got some people that are talking about, emotional stuff, Rick here. And I know Linda's probably has other things in mind. And so glad to be here and have you learn, Susan. We're really happy to have you here as well. But so there was a reason that you shifted more into what we call the medical intuitive stuff. And stuff is probably not the right word, but hi, Bobby. Hi, Stephanie. Is that there was a distinct reason why you did this.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that.
Yeah, for sure. You know what, and I'm sure you know this, and I'm glad that you acknowledge that we are different, because you have to be vibrationally different to be able to, feel the way we feel about things, connect the way we do, read energy, be able to connect with the spirit world. We're definitely not your average bears, for sure. That's
Isn't there a football team by that or something? In the States, as they would say.
Yeah.
Yeah,
there should be.
I think it's a Chicago team. So Suzane, get your facts straight. But yes,
Chicago Bears.
yes. There we go. Hi, Julia. Hi, Bobby. Hi, Susan. So
I'm sure that you know this, and it's been like this for me on my journey for sure. It's kind of, I'm chosen and selected to do. They put me through a series of life events, and then my gifts for those things light up, and then I can get through them. And so I was doing mediumship. So for a very long time, I was working with clients, through the grief process, through the, having parents that have lost children, the worst, most devastating hardships that families can go through. And I spent a big time of my practice doing that. And then things started to shift and change a little bit. And I feel like, in the beginning, I started off being a registered acupuncturist. That was like my first, step into the whole woo-woo world, which really wasn't that woo-woo, because I had to go to university for, 3 years. learn all the
What a lot of
acupuncture.
people don't know is that you do have to go through a lot of schooling to be an acupuncturist.
Oh yeah,
And contrary to what people think, they think it's just, but it's not. And it's a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot
yes.
of study and all of the above. So
Yes. Yeah, and it's huge because you also, you have to not only, study everything in the English aspect of it, but you're studying medicine that is from China. So
yes.
you have to learn all of the Chinese words from it, and you have to, so there's lots for sure. And
And
so at some point in my practice, my acupuncture practice, I would be, doing consultations with clients and sitting at my desk and, doing my intake and writing things down. And I was finding that I was writing things down before they were saying them.
mhm.
So that kind of started to happen. And then when they were on my table and before I was putting the needles in, I was hearing, put it in this point, do this point, put that, they've got this going on. And so it was very interesting for me to navigate that because I feel like I'm a bit of a control freak. So
That, but that sometimes has advantages in terms of being a control freak makes you really focus and question and like make sure that you're getting it right, because we are talking about working on a human being. We're talking about they're working on their energy centers. We're talking about how that the blockages in those energy centers has a tremendous effect on their lives, on their health, on their all aspects of that. So the fact that you would be anal about that is a good thing, actually, to be honest with you.
yeah, I think so. And I think my clients appreciated that. I feel like my spirit team probably was like, we would have liked her just to be a little bit more follow the leader instead of have to be the leader.
Yeah, well, one has to be, one of both things. And I have to say that, interesting enough that I have no idea. Just recently I was with a few people out here, and they said to one of them just said out of the blue, like, Suzanne, do you know how long you've been doing this? And I go, yeah, I know. I know. I certainly know how long I've been doing this. And do you know you were doing this, publicly before most other people? I go, yes, I do. And again, it's not something that I think about in my world anymore. And that's what I do think about it, though, is that and that was the other thing about that came up in the conversation was that the new world of people doing this, and I'm sure, like you, me, we came from old school
Right.
of traditions and ethics and ethics and ethics and the do's and the don'ts. And one of the things that and unless people have done some serious study now, or have gone to the old school of Theosophists, which is where we came from.
Right.
I think that it's how do I say this tactfully, Suzanne, which you don't always do. It is that not only are you doing a disservice to yourself, but you're doing a disservice to your clients.
Right.
And it's sort of like anything else. It's sort of like all professions, including when you became an acupuncturist, one has to go to school for it. Right. If you're a doctor, you have to go to school. For a lawyer, you got to go to school. For a teacher, you got to go to school. Even for a plumber, you got to study with somebody.
Right. Yes. Yes.
This field, people got shingles, and
Right.
and want to charge a whole lot of money and whatever, and then they wonder why they get the reaction the way they get, or they because the media world, I don't have to tell you, it's like the minute you do something, it goes like wildfire. I mean, in the community, as you well know.
Yes.
And it's like don't get involved with this person because they are they don't know what the hell they're talking about or whatever.
Right.
And it's interesting because the other thing is that somebody said to me the other day is that before there was where you could go on the internet and talk about people, that didn't exist for me.
Right.
And I was actually one of the first ones that publicly came by, and my friends would say, like, are you crazy? You're opening the forward and they can say anything they want to say about you. And I go like, well, I guess that's the deal. And you never, as you well know, you're never ever going to ever please 100%.
Right.
If you get a good 80 or 90, that's pretty darn good.
Oh yeah.
But I felt that was important, is to have that open forum, which now, I mean, we're 25 years later, I had taken such a strong to do that, and I think you know what I'm talking about. So so that's all part of what what we're talking about in terms of your training and how you got to this point and where we are.
Yeah.
So
I mean, and this is the thing. I have such great respect for you because, your foundational, impact is huge, right? Like, and I was so lucky to, you were one of the first, mediums that I ever saw, working live, doing live. And so I kind of saw the way it's supposed to be and, the morality around it all because as soon as that famous medium on TV telling everybody walking down the street and saying to people, I have your grandmother coming through, I have your father, it made all of the wannabe mediums come out of the woodwork, right? They all wanted to be rich and famous and be on TV.
Right.
Yeah. And it was,
Right.
and I can remember watching that show, and I'm sure you guys, without me having to say your name, I'm sure you guys know.
Yes.
I think
Yes.
she's from your state, is she not? Or well, I mean,
Yes.
tied it close to it anyways.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I knew watching her that first and foremost, we are in the business of death and dying.
Yes.
So how do when spirit's coming through to you, because of course as soon as you're open to the spirit world, we know how this is, the doors
Yeah.
open, they come through automatically. But it's our job to know, okay, I don't walk up to somebody that is not asking me to come in, and because not everybody's death is like rainbows and unicorns. Not everybody's relationship with their loved ones in spirit was beautiful.
Right. Well, if you remember correctly, again, first of all, when I started my professional life, the only way you could actually see a medium anyway publicly were either spiritual churches or psychic fairs. Nothing else existed.
Yeah.
And in that world, what you would do is if you walked up to somebody and you say, may I enter your vibration? That was the first thing that you did.
Right.
And you certainly can't do that if you're somebody walking up to somebody down the street.
No.
And of course, in the conversations that I've had with people about that, they go, well, the person had to sign a disclosure, so they really knew it wasn't, really that you were entering a vibration without permission. But damn it, you are entering a vibration without permission because you publicly have made an announcement that you're walking down the street and giving this message and information, whether you signed up whatever you signed before anyway. So people get the idea is that's what you're supposed to do, and it's far from what you're supposed to do.
Right. Yeah.
And it's interesting because you brought up earlier, if you walked up to somebody and they lost their son and their daughter, I mean, like, number one, they could have a heart attack, and number two, talk about entering a person who's at their deepest wits of pain and sorrow and because we all know losing children are sort of like at the top of it here, and so we actually have somebody on here who's talked about how lost her son 5 years ago, and it's like it's every moment of your day.
Right.
If you have to get through the moments of your day, forgetting about the moments of the years.
Right.
And you have somebody that just, as you say, flippant, because that's what we're talking about here.
Yes. Yeah.
About that kind of loss is like, what kind of a person are you? It's like, I think one of the things that is so true now in the world is that, what kind of a person are you?
Right. Yeah.
It's not about anything greater than what kind of a person you are, and your sense of grace and your sense of character, and that seems to have been something that's kind of gone out the door, to be honest with you.
Yes.
And in all levels of our life, and I'm not even just talking about what we're doing here, and it's sort of like whatever happened to like human decency, and the human decency of entering a vibration of a person that you don't know that they might have lost a child,
right?
it was interesting because I was just with my friend of mine who's a very well-known cardiologist, and she has an integrated center here in San Diego, and it's really quite wonderful. And she would do these resorts out in Hawaii about 15 years ago, and
Right.
I really had the honor to go to it with all these doctors, and here's Suzanne. And and I'm sure you've had this experience happen, but one of the things that was really kind of interesting is I was giving a message to this gentleman, and I said, "My God, you lost a son," and he said, "Yes." And you know how you never forget certain things, and it's like the bell goes off,
Mhm.
and so my friend was his doctor, his cardiologist, and that's what everybody was at this conference about. It was like doctors and nutritionists and yogas and all the things that one has to deal with when they're healing, with grief.
Right. Right.
And I walked away, and then I turned around and I came back and I go like, "No, you lost two sons."
Wow.
And at the end of that my lecture, of doing my thing, my friend the cardiologist, she walked up and she said like, "My God, I am so sorry," and this is a doctor who's really brought me to that conference for that reason,
Right.
being the only doctor there. I mean, the only non-doctor there.
Yeah.
And he said, "But you never asked." And
Hmm.
I never forgot that. And it was like, and this is a doctor that is into grief and healing, and that's why she brought me there, because she thought that was as important in her profession of healing as her being a cardiologist or
Right.
another doctor being there.
Yeah. The
And
physical aspects.
yes, and it was so sort of like that's what we're talking about, is that
Right.
is that just because he never said that there was another one, you know, um, and it was just you could have heard a pin drop in the room. You just could have
Right.
heard a
Right.
pin drop in the room.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's kind of what we're talking about. We're talking about that. And when you're working on your clients with what you do, I am sure this comes up for you, and you probably, I assume, because they know your background or they know you've been a medium or whatever. Um, they may want to be privy to those messages you have at that moment in time when you're working on the center, because we know the centers is the direct line to
Right. Yeah.
the connective world. So
Yes.
I'm assuming, not assuming, that you probably do a little of that, because it is all tied in with the healing.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, every soul has their soul family energy around them always. And, that's a big thing we were going to talk about tonight, is about how the emotional aspects that you carry, right, affect you physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And the truth is, those people in our soul circle are, our family members that have passed, that are no longer with us, our generational people that are no longer with us.
Hmm.
All of their frequencies affect us.
Yes.
They have a great effect on us,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And especially many of us, and I feel like mediums play a really big role in this, is that there's a lot of generational trauma that needs to be healed on this planet.
Hmm.
And I feel like one of the job titles that we do have as mediums is to kind of like be that bridge that mends those traumas and those wounds. And it's not an easy task, right?
Yes, yes. Well, I don't know the name of it, and you probably maybe would know the name of it. But one of the things that I learned many years ago is there's a I don't know, sect is probably the wrong word. But there's a philosophy, I guess, for lack of better words, in the Japanese culture, where you're responsible
Right.
for your heritage. Like, it's like if your grandfather did something or your great grand, you are responsible for that karma.
Right.
And I was always fascinated by that, because it's really true. Because if you think about the connective link, like you chose these parents and they chose those
Yeah.
parents, and
Yeah.
as we know, when there are certain traumas within families, that gets passed down. I mean, if you had to, honestly, if there was an abuse in the parents above, and that we all know goes down many times to the children and to the
Right.
children's children,
Yeah.
until those patterns are broken.
Right.
And I remember that I hadn't thought about it so succinctly until I read it, because that was actually my first book. The first language that got translated in was Japanese.
Oh,
So,
wow, that's cool.
yeah, which is really kind of interesting. One would think it would be other, no, but it was a Japanese.
Yeah.
And I had learned they were very into mediums.
Right. Yes, for sure.
So I just felt like, wow, that is really something that they believe you are responsible karmically to your ancestral tree. Basically, that's what we're talking about.
Yes, well, for sure. And I mean, if you look at a lot of customs traditionally, there's a high reverence for the spirit world.
Yes.
You walk into people's homes and there's an altar. There's, they burn incense to honor, so there's so much that I think in Western civilization, we've kind of had that wiped from us. But those of us who work in the spirit world, we know, how important that connection is, that understanding of that on so many levels for so many reasons.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's true because if you think about it, that the people who have had difficult relationships with parents, grandparents, fathers, siblings, and how you go about dealing or not dealing with it.
Right. Yes.
So it's really, really, really so interesting. I just wrote in my newsletter this month that one of my oldest friends of 50 years just crossed over about a month ago, and I haven't gone to a memorial in a really long time, but of course I had to go to this one. And what was really interesting is that the memorial that was done was all by her friends. There was not one blood person in that group, that room, because she was an only child and she was adopted, and whatever, they're all basically all dead. And that these friends that she had created over 50 years of her life did everything. It was like amazing. Wow. She died penniless.
Wow.
But every single thing was taken care of. They took care of taking care of her in the home when she had the pancreatic cancer. They took care of all her bills. They took care of cleaning out her apartment. I mean, it was just amazing to me that she had created this incredible family. Incredible family.
Yeah.
So we have a question here from David. I'm adopted. How does it work for me in terms of being karmically responsible for past generations? I am tied to all sorts of people. Don't know, never will, or am tied to my adopted family. Really good question. What you say?
I love that, and I've had that question. I've had clients come in for readings before and bring up that question, and it's so interesting because first and foremost, somebody who has been adopted has a very special mission. Like you are somebody. You're definitely an old soul. You definitely have a really big picture around your experiences and why you're here and the purpose of it. And of course, we do come here as souls for self exploration. We're here to explore.
Right.
But it's very interesting how somebody who is adopted has almost like this, they're just showing me like this extra energetic space around the experiences. So for people like that, like us we're not adopted, our family members are very close to us energetically, right? There's kind of like that,
right,
which makes it hard to breathe sometimes energetically, right? And so when somebody's adopted, it's like there's that extra space energetically. So I would love to know, Dave, do you find that you're highly intuitive, your psychic abilities are strong, or even your ability to feel into the spirit world? Because you do have that like extra gift, which is that extra space around you.
And also the other key component is that, first of all, we choose our parents.
Exactly. Yes.
And so that means you've also chosen this possibility that these parents that you chose weren't going to raise you.
Right.
So it's like the double whammy, one would say. Well, he says, whatever that means, lots of love. And he says, yes, I feel like I am sensitive. And we have Michelle here, this sort of the same sort of theme going on.
Oh,
He's
another
like,
adopted
I guess David started a whole thing going on, a whole thread of those sort of those questions. But and it's interesting because I'm sure the people that you've met, the people that I've met, they run the gamut. I'm adopted. Wow, we got a whole thing. Had a reading from me a few years ago. Well, thank you so much for that, Jack. That was great. But I love David's comment here. Whatever that might mean. Lots of love. But what's kind of interesting is that I think. Let's see. So now we got another one here. I put up my son for adoption who found me after 45 years, and yes, he said he felt something was missing. It's interesting. That's Julia. I am, and both my kids are, and all my siblings and all my husband's sisters are. Wow. So we really started a whole thread going on here.
We opened up that door into the spirit world.
Look, I think okay, I was adopted at birth. My mother has always had a wall up, cared for her throughout her sickness until her death, and she would never tell me. She loved me. She loved my dad. He was my best friend. He was just the opposite, and I cared for them both in my home. Well, and you're a hospice nurse. And Stacy, we're not surprised. Why would we possibly be surprised about that?
Well, what's interesting too, though, is okay. So as a soul, you choose your parents, right? You incarnate into this particular lifetime. You choose your parents for their genetic, energy, for the emotional, the trauma, the drama, all of that. So interesting, you would choose those souls so that you could come into the world, but then your placement changes. So it's like now you're on a different assignment, and the reason they're showing me that happens is because you needed all of those strengths and all of those gifts from your soul parents to take it into that family that you were being adopted into, so that you could help those souls work on all of their stuff.
Correct. And it's interesting because a couple of people said they always felt something was missing. But and I'm sure I get that. But I would also say, and you guys could, you can always correct me, is that it does in some ways make you be a strong person.
Yes.
It's like if there's nothing else, because actually, oddly enough, my mother gave me away when I was born. And then they took me back when I was like 8 or 9 months old.
Yeah.
And so there was
it's interesting. My mom too, when she was born, my grandmother gave her up for adoption. And then when she was, I think 4 or 5 months later, they brought her back. She was living with nuns in a convent.
I was living with, I don't even know who. Some woman must have taken me home from a hospital and took care of me. Wow. And it's interesting because, as we all know, when you come into the world, it's bonding with your mother.
Right, right.
And so I must have bonded with this woman. And then I was taken from her to my blood mother.
Right, right.
And so it's like, did the bonding continue or whatever? I mean, and I with that process, and it's the same thing. I'm the only one that really took care of my mother at the end.
Interesting though. So can I ask you though, like, what was your relationship like with your mother though? Like, I mean,
difficult.
Yes. Okay.
First of all, it was difficult because she was a completely narcissistic woman.
Right.
And my friends had said, like, if she would have done that and been a different person, it's almost like there would have been more of a forgivingness.
Right, right.
But in the other case, it was that I think that, and because of that, from day one, my life was really about survival.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
And so I'm a phenomenal survivalist because of that.
Yeah.
And I think that when you go into a profession like I did at a time that it was, they made fun of you. They put me through shock treatments for 6 months because supposed to talk to the other world, and this is a different time. We're talking, and I think if you're not strong, you're not going to survive it. It's as simple as that. You're not going to walk into this kind of a world and do this, knowing that you're going to constantly test it. I mean, like every minute you're going to be tested. Prove me. That whole thing, and then become public with it.
Yeah.
In New York City, nonetheless.
Right.
And it is really true. If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. And so they're not going to like, make you feel good about what you do if you don't know what the hell you're doing. So
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Although these people, were adopted, I mean, and again, mine is a little bit different, but actually I was given away. So I somewhere that's in this, whatever it is.
It'd be interesting to hear from everybody though, if you consider yourselves to be like a stronger person and more, do you know what I mean? It'd be interesting if you feel like that. I know somebody put in there that they always felt different. Like they always felt like something was missing.
Right.
And that makes sense. But I feel
and Michelle says you need to be very self-sufficient as an adoptee. So that's what we're talking. That's really what we're talking about. So, so choosing that means that you're going to probably come into life and really do something that's significantly important.
Yes.
You're probably going to be maybe not traditionally in a serving profession, but probably indirectly through a serving profession, just because of how you're wired from that experience. Because, that experience started you when you came into this world. I mean, it's, and as we all know, babies are very tuned in.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that I've learned, with all my scientific studies is that children can't differentiate between this world and the other world up until like they're 5 years old.
Yeah.
So it means you got that direct program line going on there.
Right. Yeah.
And all this stuff filters in. And it's always so interesting that people, unless they're tuned in, they don't always get how tuned in children are. And that's why they say out of the mouths of, because they may not have a certain filter system unless a lot of adoptees become people pleasers. That's interesting. That's a kind of and that's probably a hard role to break from Michelle. That's kind of an interesting, but that makes a lot of sense because you want to please because you weren't sure. It's like when your parents give you, it's supposed to be mother's love is whatever is supposed to be the most significant one. And if the mother doesn't want you, then who would? I totally get that. I could see why that would be really, really significant in here. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. It's interesting how I'm just like the comments that the people that have been adopted are making. It also makes me feel like somebody who's an empath, like, somebody who's an empath is also dealing with all of that stuff as well. So and if anybody, and let me know if you guys are, any of you consider yourself to be empaths, or maybe it's a new word for you. You haven't heard it before, but it is very interesting because as empaths, we feel like we don't fit in either. Like we just don't.
Right.
Which is interesting for sure.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm lucky here because there's a lot of these people that have, obviously I have seen over the years.
Yeah. Done lots of reading.
It seems to be that way. So can you see any of these on the right hand side? These comments, Jodi?
Yes. Yeah. I'm just reading everybody's comments in there.
Okay. Yeah. I just want to do a real quick shout out here to Linda about her son. And I don't know who I'm getting. There's a David or there's a Danny or there's a D name male. I don't know if that's her son or somebody that's connected to her or connected to her son, because when they gave me that information that way. But what I do want you to know is this. However he crossed, whatever was going on with him, there must have been something with his head, because I keep getting my hands on my head. And it's interesting, and I don't know how old he was, but it's interesting. He goes, "Mommy, my head doesn't hurt anymore." And somehow he wants you to know that. He also wants you to know that you were a phenomenal mom. So I'm just giving you some kudos over there. And there must be another sibling. It looks like he might have had a brother, might be still here. And there's a link there. And by the way, I know you are aware of this, is that when one sibling crosses, it's extremely common that it's either the favorite sibling, the only boy, the only, the center in the family around them.
Right.
And so often the living ones feel like, well, I wish that was me and not my brother and not my sister.
Right.
And so it's that survival guilt thing, which is really, really, really intense. So if, Linda wants to have, Thank you. Two brothers. She just, okay. So she says, he was having disillusion. So there you go. But it's not a D, so that must mean there must have been somebody around him. So anyway, so thank you, Linda, for that. But you just popped in, and it's interesting. So we're talking about what he came in through here. But like I said, when I get a name, I always tell people, don't listen to just people that are crossed, because they often will have people that are connected to them. And
Right.
to be honest with you, what I really think that the name is I think it's some person he knew, another young man he knew, that crossed over either before or after him, which you may not even know, because sometimes that's in school or whatever, and you're very welcome, Linda. So, and think about it, you know.
Well, and I'll just add in there, because I mean, to piggyback your connection with him, there he's just showing me a little a gold cross, like a gold, like you'd wear, like a pendant. And I feel like there's like some type of significance to you being, acknowledging your prayers, your faith around this. So maybe not so much for him, but just having that acknowledgement of your connection. And he's just saying to me, by the grace of God. So
Yes.
your prayers around that, all of that, he's acknowledging that was tremendously supportive. So,
right. And I would have to say, if she's saying he had delusions, I would pick that up as the head thing. And he would also be saying that because he's letting you know, I don't have that now, which is always a big thing for people, because they want to know if our children carry that with them. And I go, no, because that's a biological thing. So that's
I think that's one of the best.
That goes when the body goes.
Yeah, it's one of the best perks of being a medium and doing the work that we do. I mean, it's not always easy, because of course, when we connect, we're feeling all the emotional energy that they have. But one of the things that we do is we get validation over and over and over again, that when they're not in the physical body anymore, none of the disease is there, none of the pain is there, none of the suffering is there. It's actually, I feel like this is why.
Things.
Yeah, and we get to feel that energy. You know what I mean? I'd often say to mothers, like, if you could just feel the love coming from your child right now, it's like overwhelming, and it's pure love. There's like no anxiety, there's no animosity, there's none of that. So that's beautiful.
That's great. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Wonderful. Some nice stuff. I've been to private, typically small group, but sometimes private. Often I get someone to come through in the typical same person. Is there a reason why? So somebody wants to know why typically the same person would come through in sessions. Well, if you got the sort of same people in your life, that's gonna kind of be the way it is. But if nothing else, it's certainly a validation of them coming through, and that's kind of what it is. And the truth is, I can't answer those questions, nor can Jodi answer those questions. We have no control. We have no control who shows up, and it just doesn't. That's just the way the program is. As they say, the way the cookie crumbles, and and it's sort of like, they're your people, man. They're your peeps.
That's right. We like to think that we're in control, but we actually have no.
Oh no, I know I'm not in control. There's no doubt in my mind about it, because how could I possibly have been, have my wires without for the 14 million people probably that I've been in my life in these many years.
Right.
And so it's always interesting every once in a while, because I haven't done a lot of in-person work since the pandemic, and you probably haven't either. But I've been slowly doing it now, and it's like, they'll walk, if I do an event, people, like I just did an event in Huntington Beach and San Diego, and literally two people walked up to me and they go like, Suzanne, how have you been? Do you remember when? I go like, I finally had a smile on my face. How could I possibly remember?
Somebody says to me, "Oh, you did a reading for me, and so you did our family, and so okay." And of course, with the amount of spirit energy that we connect with, and the amount of readings that we do, could you imagine if we kept them all on our Rolodex? We would probably be insane, right?
Yes.
Thankfully, spirit wipes us clean of most of it. So
right. And actually that was, when I was discussing, ethics and training, that's one of the first things that you're trained is that, they're not to remember because it's not about you.
Right.
And you probably know this, but a lot of the traditional mediums of that period of time you're talking about, and with the Brits time, a lot of them were very overweight.
Yeah.
And
a lot of them died very young.
They died very young.
Yeah.
And part of the reason they were, because you're trying to replenish all the energy that you're giving out.
Yes.
And you can only do it in a physical manner.
Right. Yes.
So, so it's
I learned that lesson the hard way. I honestly did. Like about 2 years ago, I crashed and burnt, and learned the whole physical body. You have to take care of your physical spiritual body because you can't do everything without a good physical body for sure.
Well, it's kind of like a necessity, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, of course, with my training, that was where, I understand because of now the work that I'm doing. I'm working with clients who have chronic illnesses, right? I'm working with people with the physical aspects of it. And I had to go through all of that again myself to be able to, have the empathy, to have the compassion, to be able to, and then also know what works, what doesn't work, the trial and error thing that my team always puts me through.
Right. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. Yes. She said it was very different mediums, different years, and always the same person. It's kind of a joke to my family now that they don't want to go with me or come through.
You know what? And also, Lauren, it depends on where you go, because here's another thing. So if you've been to Suzane, she is the real deal. So she's able to connect to all spirits on all frequencies and all, but that's not the truth. There's a lot of mediums out there who they're not really great at what they do. And I've had so many clients that would come to me and say, I went and saw this medium and I really wanted my mother to come through, but she wouldn't come through. And that really, and the medium said to me, oh, she's busy doing this, blah, blah, blah.
BS. BS.
Right, exactly.
My one word for that, BS.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It just meant that she didn't have the vibrational capacity to be able to go up in wavelength to what it's like turning a radio station. You just have to get really good at kind of jacking
frequencies.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
that's actually was one of my, no pun intended, that was why it was radio was my favorite medium in media. And I loved it because first of all, it was very much how I'm wired. But the other part about it is that when you're talking about radio, you can't see anybody.
Right.
And so it's like they can't accuse you of looking at somebody and thinking you said something right because they because you can't see them.
Right.
And so when I first started doing the radio stuff, people would say to me like, well, how do you talk to them on the radio? I was like, well, honey, they're dead anyway. It doesn't make a difference where they are. And so I've always thought the radio was the best analogy because it's like a telephone. That's what a radio is. And frequencies go. It's all about frequencies and energies and stuff.
And there's no visual disturbances. There's no. When my business went online, so prior to COVID, of course, I was doing in-person readings, and we would do circle readings where we'd have the families in and we'd all do that. And I can tell you this: when we started just doing everything online, it was so much easier.
Yes.
It just became so much because there's no resistance. People are in their own space, in their own home, so they're more relaxed, they're more open. And for me, it makes my job so much easier. Like when clients come on, I don't want to know anything about you. Don't tell me anything about your stuff. Don't show me any pictures. Don't.
Right. Exactly.
It makes my job harder.
Yeah.
Right.
The less I know, the happier I am.
Absolutely.
Because
sure.
I mean, well, first of all, we're always being accused of looking up stuff anyway. I don't know how the hell you do that to begin with. And I don't know how you do that in a room where you don't even know the person's name, but that's another story.
Right. They think that we're high-tech magicians as well.
Yeah.
Do you read what Barbara is saying there?
Yeah, she's saying, I was very angry with my mother for most part of my life because she took her own life. Got that one. I know that one really well, honey. Felt she was very selfish for breaking my dad's heart, leaving my siblings and myself at a young age. We were blessed that our dad was wonderful. Many years later, I visited one of your shows, and you said my dad was coming through with her, and you said she was having a very hard time at the end. She wasn't in a good place. that helped me start forgiving her. That's nice. I've got, first of all, needless to say, I've talked to thousands of people that have that they have left this planet that way, number one.
Yeah.
And I've also got in my personal life. I went through it with my nephew, and he was my boy. He was just he still is my boy. I mean, I will probably still kick him in the ass when I see him, but that's beside the point. But one thing that I do know, and that I never forgot, and I shared this with many people, particularly people that have lost children or lost children that way, is that one of the things, if there was nothing else that I knew about him, he was a tortured little boy. He was just so tortured, and I'm saying, like, how selfish of me, honestly, to want somebody want to stay here that is just so tortured. He was just, and it's like, it was his program and his, whatever. But what was interesting is that, when we were just discussing the karmic thing, it was that, all the women in my side of the family all lost sons.
Wow.
And both my grandmothers lost sons. And probably my great grandmother did, as well, because she had 13 kids. And and my mother didn't have any sons.
Wow.
But we lost a grandson. So there's always that karmic, and all of them, and only one of them died of tuberculosis. The rest of them all died of either being killed or my
Traumatic.
my one uncle was it was actually the year I was born. He went frog hunting with his dumb cousin, who shot at the rock, and the rock came out and went through his back and through his heart.
Wow.
And then then he goes to my grandmother, my grandfather. Oh, Howard's down there, Harold's down the road. Yeah, he's down the road, but he's in the creek, dead. And that was always, and it was, I'll never forget that. And when my grandmother died, this apparently is an Irish custom, which I never knew about, is there was a picture of him in his casket. And my mother found it. It was really flipped her out. And then like I said, my other grandmother lost, her son to tuberculosis, and we lost my boy to suicide. So if you don't believe that there's themes in families, it's real easy to go down the line and see where there. If there's a loss of one child, I guarantee there's going to be a loss of another. I mean, it's just what it is.
Yeah. And what do you feel like, though? Because I mean, Spirit's always showed it to me like this: that when a soul chooses an exit like that, when it's it's kind of agreed upon to take that exit, it's for the ripple effect that it has on the family, right?
That's the whole thing. Yes.
Yeah. So for anybody that loses somebody through, again, we have to have the empathy for it, because it's so hard and there's so much. But I believe there's so much misinformation around it. I really feel like it's not, these people don't go to hell. They're not, even when we connect with them energetically, again, there's, I've had some come through that will say it was a mistake. Like I wasn't intending to do it. And I just kind of pushed it too far, and then it happened.
Sometimes that happens. I've learned that happens with people that take drugs. They didn't mean to take as much as they did, and they didn't realize that, some parts of our body couldn't handle it. So there's two things here. One, Sheila said that her sister did, and apparently she had a session with me, and it was of great comfort for her. Thank you very much for sharing those words. And Linda said, is suicide an exit point? That's a good question, because I do know that we have, most of us all do, have certain points, and I learned this through, although I'm not a palmist, but in palmistry, in your hands, you'll see where the lifeline stops, and those are what I believe are probably possible exit points. And so to answer Linda's question, I think that's probably true. There probably are exit points that we make decisions, and it may not always be death. There could be a lot of other things, because we know there's a lot of the other death that's not physical death.
But there are certain souls, like my mom was actually one of them, who she was trying to take an exit at every point she could. She was a really troubled soul. She really was. And there were so many, she attempted to kill herself 2 times during her lifetime, and the rest of the time almost drank herself to death. And do you know what I mean? So there's many souls that are always trying to like, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And we get to do that. The church doesn't want us to know that. They don't want us to remember that we are immortal. We are, this doesn't
The church doesn't want us to know a lot of things.
right. This is true.
Just saying. Just saying.
But they really created a big stigma around death and dying and the fear around it because they needed to control us and have power over us. So if we, and also, if we all knew 100%, well, if I decide to take my life right now, it's not the end of me. It is the end of my life with all of these people that I may love or that I may want to be around, but it's not going to be, the immortality really truly does exist. So I feel like when, as mediums, when we're connecting with suicides, we just feel them and see them very differently, right? Like there's a big picture that's playing out. We can see how it's affecting so many people, that the lives that they've touched, that it serves a great purpose. Like it's,
and it's there's a great purpose in it, and I think that it really comes down to the bottom line is that we ultimately do what we want to do. I mean, and hell or high, that's the free will program. And people say like that to me, when God and the committee were sitting around, that was, I think, the greatest gift we were all given was this gift of free will, because you cannot make that horse drink water. It just does not happen.
Right.
You can bring the water there, but you cannot make that. You've never. It's like trying to make. They always said, my friend Janice, she always said, like, of all the things you could never do as a mother is make your kid go to the bathroom, and I go to the bathroom. That's like off. That's like off duty. You can't.
Right.
There's nothing you can sort of like do about it. So Julia's saying, how do you know what generational karma is and how can it be multiplied? I would say that, not that it's not like this equals that or whatever it is. But she's right. I think we make contacts with people before and it could be applied to suicides as well. I totally agree about it. But I will tell you this. I think one of the things is that when you see things coming over and over and over again, it's like, oh God, I recognize this. That's when you know that there is basically a generational karma with it, or within your families. That's why as I was just saying to you, is that I know for a fact of 3 generations in my family where sons died.
Right.
And so that's a no-brainer. That's pretty obvious. Yeah. Okay,
what's interesting, and the thing about with karma is that we actually don't even start to break free from it or heal from it until we have the actual awareness of it. And so, interestingly enough, we probably go like for a long, long time in our lives, and sometimes, especially in women, where they talk about the midlife crisis, right? Or in spiritual, we call it the dark night of the soul. It's like when you come into those parts, those experiences, that's when we start to recognize about karma. And like, for me, as an example, I started to recognize all of the things that my mom did in her lifetime and my grandmother did in her lifetime, and how most of the stuff that I really resented in them, I was somehow still doing it. I was still doing it, maybe not to the degree that they were doing it, but I was still doing it. And then just having that awareness of that heals it, because then you have your eyes on it, you're open to it. You can see now, not like, it's easy for us to see the stuff in other people. It's hard, right? It's easy for us to point the finger and be like that.
Yep. We are another program
when we do this. Yes.
So real quick here, I want to have you back because we got a lot of conversations going on here, and the show's going to end in 4 more minutes. But so we can continue this story. But one of the things that I want to say real quick here. One is I want you to tell people how to get a hold of you. Number one, and number two, do you got anything coming up that you want to talk about right now? You want to share with the folks out there?
Sure. So the best place is to go to my website. So that's jodi-jones.com, and it's Jodi. You can find me on Instagram and on Facebook and on YouTube. if you've got a chance to, if you haven't yet, go to our Collective Soulversations podcast, because I had Suzane on there. You have to listen and watch that episode, because it was a great conversation as well. So much. You guys will learn stuff about Suzane that you probably don't get when she's doing this stuff, but we actually got a chance to get to know her. So go check that out for sure. I have some really big projects coming up I'm some really big things that I'm excited about. Nothing that I can put out there yet, because we're still putting all the pieces together. But yeah, go check out the website, and then there's my events page on there that anything that I'm doing, you can check out there, and then connect with us on social media for sure, and watch the podcast.
Great. Yeah, it was very fun. And I'm not sure, maybe Stephanie would know. Is that still up on my site, Stephanie? My podcast with Jodi? It is? Okay, great.
Good.
So
yes, you can just go watch it over there. You can pop
yeah,
over
I should just go to my site, and it's there somewhere.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
I would say if you probably just put in Jodi's name, it's because I don't think I did it that long ago, right? Did I do it that long ago? I don't even remember now.
No, yeah. I don't think it was not too long ago, for sure. I don't remember the episode number, but you'll be able to find it for sure.
Yeah.
I definitely want to come back, because we didn't get a chance to do any, medical mediumship with people. We could bring that up to be able to do that for sure.
That was what we were going to do, but that's the problem with Jodi and I when we get involved in these conversations. But it's interesting, because I think what we did, by the way, is that we went down a path I don't think we thought we were going to go down today, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Because it all came for the whole
Yeah.
things of adoptees and all that. And that's not what we sort of had in mind. But if you think about it on a grander scale, that is also about medical mediumship, because it is about healing. On obviously the deepest, most important life we could sort of think about. So
yeah.
But,
and we're going to learn so much from I'd love to have some of the people that were adopted come on and get feedback from them as well, because again, your special souls on a special mission. You've got great purpose in how you chose to come in. So that's pretty cool.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Absolutely true. So thank you, Jodi. We'll do this again. I'm going to look at my calendar. We could see this. We could do this within the next few months, and and continue. And then we will do some medical mediumships as well. But this is medical mediumship too, also.
Beautiful.
My love and gratitude to all and everybody. It was meant to be to go. You're absolutely right, Julia. And one of the things I think is important in life is that when you find yourself going down, not the rabbit hole, but going down that direction, keep that door open, because there's a reason why we went into that, and there was a lot of folks on here that were adopted. So there you go.
Beautiful. Yeah. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks, Suzane.
Thank you, Jodi. Thanks, Stephanie, as always.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Be well. Take care. Spring is here, kids.
Yay.
Get out, smell the roses, flowers, whatever.